We are through another week of the NFL season, and with it comes another version of our weekly NFL Power Rankings, this time for Week 8. Let's see how good we did in previous weeks and how accurate we're going to be for the rest of the season. But before we get into the video, I want to ask you to please subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications. Really helps us out. If you're a fan of the NFL, you'll love this channel as we release multiple NFL-related videos every Thursday and Saturday all year long. Now, let's get back to the video. Starting out with our bottom 12, and as you can see, the bottom 7 are literally unchanged from last week in terms of both who they are and the order. I looked into changing some of these, but this order just seemed accurate, and these feel like the bottom 7 teams pretty definitively for what we see on the field. Now, with Tua coming back, the Dolphins could definitely start to rise these power rankings, but we don't know what version of Tua we're going to get back, and we don't know what the rest of the Dolphins are going to be like. I'm unwilling to move them up until I see how a healthy Tua plays with this Dolphins team. I also have the Rams and Giants flip-flop based pretty much on the fact that the Rams barely beat the Raiders and the Giants got destroyed by the Eagles, but they're still pretty bad teams. The Saints are continuing their downward fall after a 2-0 start. And yes, they have some injuries. We don't know when guys like Carr, Taysom Hill, and Olave will be back. But I mean, you also have teams like the Rams and Dolphins who are down this low because of injuries. So you can't really give the Saints that much credit given they have lost 5 in a row. And rounding it out, we have the Colts at 21, staying where they were last week after barely beating the Dolphins this past week. And the Jets falling all the way to 22nd because, let's be honest, they are 2-5, and their 2 wins are against the Patriots and the Titans, literally the 2 lowest ranked teams on this list. I will allow the Jets to still be this high because, yes, they have had some competitive games. Yes, they still have some good pieces, but this is a team that could continue to fall and may, by the end of this season, be one of the worst teams in the NFL. As much as Jets fans might not be willing to admit that. Now moving to our middle 10, you have some reasonable risers and fallers. The Cardinals moved just ahead of the Chargers after their last second win on Monday Night Football. The Seahawks moved back up after a win against the Falcons, who in turn moved down on these power rankings. And the Broncos get a little bit of a kick up thanks to their domination of the Saints. But again, as we said, the Saints are pretty bad and missing a lot of pieces, so we can't move the Broncos too high on this list. The biggest fallers here are definitely going to be the Buccaneers and the 49ers. The 49ers, I still think, are a very competitive team. It's just that they're 3-4, and it's tough to justify keeping them in the top 10 with a losing record, and so they're moving out of the top 10, but still pretty high because this team does have a talented roster, though they will be missing Brandon Ayuk for the rest of the season, and we still don't know when McCaffrey will be back. So there are a fair number of questions about the 49ers that make it so I can no longer continue to argue they belong in the top 10 based sheerly on talent. As for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're in a much worse position. I think the Buccaneers have been one of the best stories of the NFL season, but Chris Godwin's going to be out for the season thanks to what happened on Monday Night Football at the very end of the game, and Mike Evans left that game fairly early, and it's likely he's going to be missing at least a couple weeks thanks to a hamstring injury. And combine those two things together with Jalen McMillan as the #1 receiving target for the Buccaneers, I think this offense is going to start to fall apart a little bit. I don't think the running game is going to be as effective. I don't think Baker is going to be as effective. And this team just is going to start to fall apart thanks to the injuries. It sucks because they were one of the best teams in the NFC and one of the best stories of this NFL season. But I find it hard to keep them so high on the power rankings, not because of a loss to the Ravens, because, I mean, we can't blame a team for losing to a team as good as the Ravens, but more because the injuries they have need to necessitate dropping them a decent bit on these power rankings. Moving into our top 10, at number 10, we have the Philadelphia Eagles moving back into the top 10 thanks to their dominant win against the New York Giants. I did not want to put the Eagles in the top 10. I'll be completely honest. Jalen Hurts in the passing attack did not look that good. Yeah, the pass rush got home against Daniel Jones, but I mean, beating Daniel Jones doesn't tell me a lot about how good your football team is. It doesn't feel like the Eagles belong in the top 10, but it's just, who else do you put in the top 10 instead of the Eagles? I do think there's a pretty significant cutoff before the Eagles in terms of who the best teams in the NFL are. But I think the Eagles are one of, if not the best of the rest. And so I'm slotting them in here at number 10 with the 4-2 record, up 4 spots from number 14 in our prior iteration of the power rankings. At number 9, we have the Washington Commanders, first time introduced into the top 10 of our power rankings. And this is where I really feel the top 10 quality teams begin. Again, I do think there is a pretty significant cutoff between the Commanders and the Eagles, at least what I've seen on the field thus far this season. And the Commanders, especially if Jaden Daniels' injury isn't too bad and he comes back this week, are really, really good at football. Their offense is absolutely dominant. Cliff Kingsbury has turned this into one of the best offensive units in the NFL. And while their defense still isn't that great, they're able to do enough to win them football games. I think the Commanders are definitely a team on the rise. I'm not quite sure if this is their year, but this is definitely a team to watch for in the coming years who could be one of the best teams in the NFL come 2025, 2026, 2027 with how good and young this roster is and how well built a lot of this roster is around their cornerstone players like Jaden Daniels. At number 8, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers moving up one spot from last week's power rankings. They are 5-2 and look so much better. So much better with Russell Wilson under center. If you've been watching these videos throughout this season, I have been clamoring for the Steelers to start Russell Wilson and talking about how good this team could be if they moved on from Fields and moved towards Russell Wilson. They finally did it. I know a lot of people out there were questioning that decision. I obviously was not. And I think anybody who watched them play on Sunday Night Football in Week 7 agrees with me now that Russell Wilson is a much better quarterback than Justin Fields, at least for the Steelers system. I acknowledge Justin Fields got wins for the Steelers, but hey, so did Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, Devlin Duck Hodges, and Kenny Pickett. That is not saying much. It's not how many wins you get with the Steelers, it's how effective you look, because Tomlin and that defense will get you wins, no matter how bad a quarterback you are. But Russell Wilson is actually a good quarterback. George Pickens looks legit as a contested catch jump ball receiver. He was getting other guys involved. Najee Harris was explosive. Jalen Warren's back. The Steelers are legit, and they are going to be competing in the AFC with Russell Wilson. I've been telling you all year. I'm continuing to tell you. I have bought in on this team. They are for real. They are not the mirage we've seen in past years that have winning records but aren't good. This team is real, and that's why they're number 8. At number 7, with a 5-2 record, we have the Buffalo Bills holding pat from last week's iteration of the power rankings. And the crazy thing is, since week 5 of our power rankings, we've had the exact same top 7 teams. Yes, in different orders each week. But the fact that we've been this consistent, I don't think anybody can question our top 7, I think is pretty impressive. Especially given the fact that a lot of people thought that my top 7s were insane back in week 5. But I was basing it off of what I saw on the field, not what I saw in the record books. And now that the field play is turning into win and losses, I feel much better and much more vindicated in my decisions from a few weeks back. And we start here with the Buffalo Bills, who in my opinion is the weakest of these top 7 teams. But I do think there's a little bit of a cutoff between the Bills and the Steelers, at least in what I've seen thus far this season. Josh Allen literally has not thrown a pick through 7 weeks. The guy who in prior years people would be talking about threw a minimum a pick every game has not thrown a pick. It's insane. In my opinion, he should be the MVP frontrunner. I understand that right now it is Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar has been quite good too, don't get me wrong. But if I were to vote today, it would be for Josh Allen for MVP. They just traded for Amari Cooper, who in very limited action in his first week with the Bills looked phenomenal for them. He can absolutely be a wide receiver 1 for this team. They have a good running back tandem with James Cook, Ray Davis, and Ty Johnson. This team all around is really, really good. I think their defense could use some work, but definitely still has pieces with guys like Rasul Douglas on the back end to manage to stop teams' number 1 receivers. All in all, this is a good team, and let's be clear, they're winning the division because their divisional opponents are the Patriots, the Jets, and the Dolphins. And we all saw how low those 3 teams were on this power ranking, and so the Bills should have a pretty easy time winning this division. At number 6, we have the 5-2 Houston Texans. The Texans took an L last week, moving down 1 spot from number 5 to number 6 because they lost barely to a very good Green Bay Packers team. The Houston Texans are a very talented team and will be getting number 1 receiver Nico Collins back before the end of the season. The AFC South looks like a fairly weak division in football, the Colts, the Titans, and the Jaguars. None of them look very good. They're all in the bottom 12 on our power rankings for a reason. So the Texans should be able to easily walk away with this division title and get a first round home playoff game come the 2024 playoffs. I think the Texans are a very good team. Definitely have surpassed my expectations. I talked about prior to the season, one of my hot takes was that the Texans don't win the division and don't even make the playoffs. I will fully acknowledge that hot take looks ice cold right now. This team is very good. I still think they have a little bit of 2022 Vikings in them. I talked about this before. This is a team that can win close games, but will often lose pretty badly. Again, only one bad loss. That was to the Minnesota Vikings. But 2 losses to the NFC North already in the season. They have 2 more games against NFC North opponents. We'll see how those go for the Texans. They're still a very good team. They still belong here in our top 7 teams, which I think is a pretty good boundary for the top teams in the league. But they're still on the lower end at number 6 of those teams. At number 5, moving up 1 spot from last week at 5-2 is the Green Bay Packers. They move up that 1 spot after beating the Houston Texans in week 7. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The Packers are really good. They have a ton of receivers. They have a running game. They have Jordan Love. They have a defense. Their offensive line is decent. And oh yeah, apparently they now have a kicker too. The one thing that the Green Bay Packers were missing. We'll see if that lasts for multiple weeks. But if they can actually get their kicking game going, all of a sudden the Green Bay Packers may be one of the most feared teams in the NFL if they weren't already. And the crazy thing is on this list, the Packers are just the second of 4 NFC North teams to show up on this power ranking. There are still 2 more coming up. So don't be surprised if the Packers don't have as dominant a record come the end of the season as some of the other top teams in the league. Only because I think the NFC North is really going to beat up on each other once they start playing divisional games. But I mean, if you look at the NFC North, this division has not lost a game outside of the division since week 3. Look it up. They have not lost a game outside of the division since week 3. The Packers lost only 1 game outside of the division in week 1. The Bears lost 2 games outside of the division, week 3 and prior. And the Lions lost 1 game outside the division in week 2. The NFC North against non-NFC North opponents is 17-4 as a collective. That is insane, but once these teams start playing each other, I expect all of their records to start to decline, but we're probably not going to knock them too much in the power rankings because we know how good these teams are when they play anyone else. Moving on to number 4, we have another NFC North team, the Minnesota Vikings, holding pat at the 4 spot with a 5-1 record. They lost to a divisional opponent in the Detroit Lions, a team yet to come on this power ranking, which shows you that it's a very tough loss to take. Yeah, it was at home in Minnesota, but man, was this a close game. The Vikings were down by 11 points in the 4th quarter, came all the way back, took a 1-point lead, could have been a 3-point lead if, they didn't miss both 2-point conversions. And then the Lions were able to kick a game-winning field goal with 15 seconds left, shut the Vikings down so they couldn't get a game-winning field goal. And the Lions took the win, but that does not mean this Vikings team isn't legit. We are 6 weeks into the NFL season. That means we are over 1/3 of the way through the season in terms of Vikings games, and the Vikings have not played a bad game of football yet. They have beat top teams like the Houston Texans, like the Green Bay Packers, and they barely lost to the Detroit Lions. Those are 3 of the best teams in the league, at least per our power rankings that they've played, and the Vikings are 5-1. This team is legit. I expect them to stay as one of the top teams in our power rankings. However, much like with the Green Bay Packers, as the Vikings continue to play divisional opponents, they're the only one who's played 2 divisional games thus far in the NFC North, I expect the Vikings to fall down a little bit in terms of their record, but I mean, come on. They were never going to finish 14-3 anyway. That would have been insane. They're probably going to finish with like an 11-win record, which is still really, really good. At number 3, we have the Baltimore Ravens holding pat at number 3 from the previous week with a 5-2 record. A big win on Monday Night Football. The scoreline was a lot closer than the actual game was in terms of how the Ravens performed against the Buccaneers, where they dominated the Buccaneers pretty much for the entire game. After the Buccaneers went up 10-0 early in that game, it was all Ravens until we were effectively in garbage time, where finally you had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers score a touchdown, get an onside kick, score a touchdown, put up some points, but it was all in vain. At that point in time, we knew the Baltimore Ravens were winning this football game. It was already a foregone conclusion. They are one of, if not the best teams in the NFL since week 2. However, they do have the weakest loss of all our top teams on this list, losing to the Las Vegas Raiders. They are number 3 on this list because every team gets one, but it's just hard to put the Ravens any higher than 3, especially given who's left on this list and what they've done with their NFL seasons. At number 2, we have the NFC leading Detroit Lions tied with the Minnesota Vikings for the second best record in the NFL at 5-1, holding pat from last week's power rankings of them. The Lions got the big win against the Vikings that we talked about a little before when talking about the Minnesota Vikings. The Lions' offense looked very good. Their defense looked solid enough against a very good Vikings offense, especially given Aiden Hutchinson is going to be out likely for the entirety of the season. Don't be surprised if the Lions pull the trigger to bring in a pass rusher before the trade deadline, because Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, and the rest of the Lions brass know that the Lions are absolutely competing for the Super Bowl, and with teams like the 49ers struggling, the Cowboys and Eagles struggling, a lot of the elite teams in the NFC are not quite what they used to be. If the Lions can win this division, you make all your NFC North opponents, who are probably the best other teams in the NFC North, go on the road for the duration of the playoffs, and all roads lead through Detroit to New Orleans and the Super Bowl. That's what the Lions want. They can absolutely make it to the Super Bowl. I think right now I'd be hard-pressed to say that the Lions are not Super Bowl favorites to come out of the NFC in terms of Super Bowl attendance. And so that's why they belong here at number 2 in our power rankings. And at number 1, it's our only undefeated team remaining. It's our 2-time defending Super Bowl champions. It doesn't seem to matter that Patrick Mahomes is 6 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. The Chiefs still belong here at number 1 on our power rankings. In fact, the fact that they are 6-0 with Mahomes being frankly bad should scare everybody in the NFL, because if Mahomes doesn't need to play well for them to be the best team in the NFL in terms of record, imagine what happens if Mahomes plays good. That's scary. I don't totally know if I want to see what that's going to look like and how good this team could be with an all-star Mahomes playing at his MVP level that we've seen in every playoff he's ever played in before. And so with that on the horizon and them being 6-0, I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's going to take a lot for me to move them out of the number 1 spot. We haven't seen it, and so they hold at number 1. And so that's it for our Week 8 iteration of the Power Rankings. But as always, the video is not done. We always pick our Thursday night football match at the end of these videos because our weekly pick'ems do not come out until after that game has already occurred. This week, we have the Minnesota Vikings playing the Los Angeles Rams. Now, the Rams are likely to get Cooper Kupp back. They're getting a little bit healthier. However, I don't think that's going to be enough for the Rams to overcome the Minnesota Vikings. I talked about it before. The Vikings have played some of the best football this year in the NFL. They are really, really good. They barely lost to the Detroit Lions. And so even though it's a short week, even though the Vikings are on the road, even though Matt Stafford might have a little bit of resentment towards the Vikings being a Lions player and playing against the Vikings twice a year for so long, I still think the Vikings are more than good enough of a team to pull off this win on the road on Thursday Night Football and move to 6-1. And so now that's it for this week's power ranking video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, remember to leave a like and comment down below. Help us out, help us grow. As well, a reminder to everybody that we stream on Twitch at the same as in this channel, 4th and Goal 101, for every primetime game. That's Thursday night, that's Sunday night, that's Monday night. So if you watch these videos already and want to see more of my content, come and join us on the Twitch stream. It's really fun. We have a lot of great people in it. I hope you all do enjoy. And now, until then, peace!